All right, guys. Sit rep May 17th, 2025. I no longer count the days. I notice you guys on Electronic Intifada still somehow count the days.
Day
So
590 is beginning.
there you go. Jon Elmer's here, guys. Hey, John.
Hey, Justin.
So I imagine people watch the sit rep on Sunday and then they watch the Electronic Intifada live stream on Thursday. However, I still nonetheless feel obliged to catch people up, even though they're probably caught up to Thursday, but to keep the narrative um, consistent. Last Sunday, I was talking about the decision which they just announced. Hamas had just announced to release the American Israeli soldier captured on October 7th. And they did release him. And they said they were releasing him in exchange for opening the crossings above all. But basically, they were saying, like, we're talking directly to the Americans now without the Israelis involved. And we're going to show the Americans that we are serious by releasing this guy. And um, they had done that with the Russian Israelis already.
Hmm.
They just released them without any asking for anything in return. So this was sort of putting America on par, I guess, saying, look, we're going to talk to the great Satan instead of the little Satan. Although I don't know which Satan is which anymore, and I don't think anybody does. But like it seemed like an important development that they were talking to the Americans directly, and the Americans were talking to them directly. So I thought like it was worth a try. Um, and I know that it possibly set a bad precedent, but from my perspective, I thought, the Israelis are trying to kill their hostages, their prisoners anyway, the Israelis that are in Gaza. So and there was a near miss apparently with this prisoner in particular. I remember an announcement from Abu Ubaidah weeks ago where he said, "We've lost contact with the team that has this guy." And then presumably they found him and got him out and they released him. And then immediately the Israelis dropped 40 tons of bombs on a hospital and said that they thought they were doing it to kill senior Hamas leadership, and they were announcing that they killed the senior leadership, and the crossings were not opened, and there was no and today I think it was there was a story of how Witkoff, the envoy, the special envoy that was negotiating all this, more or less proudly said like, we sure deceived them. We sure got one over them when we told them that we were going to open the crossings, and then we didn't.
Yeah. Just brutal, duplicitous, as I said on the show on Thursday, just like duplicitous criminality. Yeah. Um, I mean, I think there's some differences with the Russians. Like the Russians
Yeah,
weren't soldiers.
yeah,
I mean, I think that this guy was such a soldier. He was like captured off a tank. He was a
mhm,
lone soldier who came from the US. Yeah, it's dark because it was already difficult enough to envision how
mhm,
Qassam can negotiate with these people who just violate every agreement. And I think in a lot of ways the soldier that was released, like he kind of had one foot out the door the whole time. His dad talked to the New York Times and said that he was separated from people sometime after Trump was elected. We know that he was also the good faith gesture when the stage one, from phase one to phase two ceasefire negotiations, when Qassam was trying to keep momentum up, or the U.S. as well. I guess at that point, Witkoff was trying to get a deal or thought he could
That's
get a
what he said.
deal. And
Yeah.
so this American soldier was going to be the person to be released to sort of get momentum going for phase two. So I think that there is a lot of like sort of little elements about this that can make it exceptional. It was just a really big gamble.
It was a big
Um,
gamble. And it's a time for big gambles, but I think it's I think it was a justifiable decision in every way, but I also think it's pretty safe to say that it didn't work. It
yeah.
didn't it didn't
Yeah, I
pay
mean
off.
things are devastating, right? Like the situation with the starvation levels, with the famine, with the like basically,
Yeah.
this laboratory that they've got going in Gaza for starvation that we've never seen before in human history.
Yeah.
I
So just
think
to
that
explain that, like every other imposed famine, and there have been many imposed famines, there have been many sieges in history where people starved to death en masse, but this is the first time where there is no where to go even so like when I think about like an imposed famine, I think about the Germans in Namibia, what's now Namibia, the Herero and Nama genocides in 1905. And they starved them and they destroyed their food sources. They destroyed their villages and destroyed their crops. And then the people sort of walked to the desert looking for oases. And most of them just died of thirst in the desert. But in Gaza, they can't walk. There's nowhere to go. Like the Armenian genocide or the Trail of Tears, people are being marched and they're dying along these marches, these death marches. In
or they're
Gaza, they
getting
are.
like communicable diseases, the kind of stuff, and secondary are being killed by secondary situations that make it less easy to quantify directly cause and effect in that sense. In Gaza, people are starving en masse, and I think that it shows, like, because it's just totally unprecedented for the resistance to hand over a soldier for nothing. But it's just such a devastating moment in human history that I think that it's, to their credit that they are willing to do something that is so far beyond, you know, yeah, and just to have it be treated and sort of like, you know, almost mocked by, it seems like Witkoff's, I guess it's his kid is in on it and like doing media interviews about it, and just that there was like, yeah, that they had no intention of opening anything. There wasn't even really a mechanism, which was what I was concerned about last Sunday. It was like I don't know what the mechanism was to get aid at that point. There's a concern that it would have fed into this whole Rafa model, which is like essentially privatized U.S. and Israeli companies profiteering off of this.
Mhm.
I mean, I hate to say we don't have words for it, but I don't even know what to describe the aid distribution hubs where there's supposed to be four distribution hubs in all of Gaza. Whereas there's 400 today. And so just the idea that they're going to force people to go to Rafah in order to get something to eat. And
Yeah,
then
that's what I was gonna say. Like there are death marches in Gaza. People are constantly doing death marches because they give you an evacuation order to evacuate from here and then from where you evacuated and then back and forth like that.
and they kill you in the streets. I mean, that's what we're seeing right now is just like bombing of people in the streets, and like the buildings are gone. People are being bombed in tents, and I think that I think it can't be separated from Trump stepping away from the Yemen war, and I think surprising everybody, including his own navy,
Mhm.
that he was stepping away from that war. He's just so erratic that I think, in terms of a gamble,
Yeah.
it made, I can, how about I can see why they did it.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, it's
But there is a thing happening in the, I would say, like pro-Palestine social media space, which I referred to last sit rep as like rainmaking, where people are like, I'm not gonna name names, but like you'll go on a YouTube channel and it'll be someone who's like, the ceasefire is closer than ever. The ceasefire is closer than ever. We're close to a ceasefire. This is, and everything, no matter whether it's like an uptick in bombings or a downtick in bombings, that indicates the ceasefire is coming. Whether it's a big massacre or a day of calm, it indicates that the ceasefire is coming. And it's just like, I understand you want to like have hope, but like this is not analysis. This is just hope, and then you're seizing on whatever. There's no way to prove or disprove this hypothesis, uh, because you've made it not testable. You've made every piece of evidence for the coming ceasefire. And then the other one is like the idea that Trump and Netanyahu have fallen out, or that Trump is slowly, carefully challenging the pro-Israel lobby. And it's like, there was that when Witkoff, in January, when that ceasefire deal happened, I think there was some basis for that, but there's no basis for that now. And I just, again, it's a hypothesis that cannot be proven, because if Trump praises Israel, it's because he's setting them up for the fall. If he doesn't say something, and like he went to Saudi Arabia and they didn't mention Israel, and I'm like, they for all of American history, when Americans go to Saudi Arabia, they don't mention Israel. This is not new. This is the norm. The norm is you don't talk about Israel. That doesn't mean that there's been a falling out between America and Israel. Not at all.
yeah.
So, they do this all the time. They said Obama and Netanyahu hated each other. Before Obama gave Netanyahu $38 billion or whatever. They said Biden hated Netanyahu and thought he was a son of a bitch in private in his heart, before he did, resupply number 500.
Yeah.
So,
And now
so
they can't find anyone who in the administration who was working tirelessly for a ceasefire,
yeah,
right? So those are the most important aspects of this. And yeah. Yeah, it's a dark moment. It just there's no there's there's no mechanism for any kind of
mediated or negotiated.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
because the
just
mediators are plainly on Israel's side. Qatar,
well, Qatar was the
Egypt.
one who, because it wasn't direct, it was indirect negotiations with the US. So what that means is that it was Egypt and Qatar that got the American soldier released, right?
Hmm.
So it's like,
Hmm.
and then those are, I mean, not so much Egypt, but like Qatar was at the center of this
Yeah. And you're supposed to get
tour that
something
Trump's
back.
on.
Yeah. You're supposed to get something back when you do this. When you squeeze something out of one side as a mediator, you're supposed to squeeze the other side for something.
Yeah.
And Egypt had passed on Israel's proposal that Hamas disarm a couple weeks ago. So these are bad mediators. Like, according to negotiation theory, you go read Getting to Yes from the Harvard Negotiation Project. This is not how it's done. This is not how it's done whatsoever. This is not principled bargaining. This is not how you do it. And this is their theory again, right? It's Americans who came up with this framework for negotiation. But it's also Americans who, when I think about the way Witkoff was gloating about deceiving the Palestinians, it's like just think of all the treaties that the US signed with indigenous nations, and like,
Yeah. I
right?
like
It's
that
like,
sit rep.
yeah. So that's how they came to get what they got, by basically making treaties and then breaking them. So it really is a, a tradition. It's as American as MK-84 bombs or whatever. Um, so the other thing that's not new on while we stay on the Gulf visit is like the idea that Trump gave trillions or got trillions, like just a global economy 101, right? Um, the Gulf is the biggest source of oil. I mean, there's lots of oil in the world, but this is the most easily accessible, sweetest, lightest, most fantastic oil and beyond belief. Um, that sets, the bar for all the other oil in the world. And they um, sell their oil and they get dollars, more dollars than they could possibly ever know what to do with. And the Americans have always, since they created Saudi Arabia out of nothing in the 20th century, made the deal that the Saudis will spend their dollars on American junk and they can keep their dollars, in US securities, but when it comes time to actually spend them, the Saudis are not allowed to buy American key industries, strategic industries are forbidden from using the money to take over the American economy, but they are allowed to buy the most expensive American military equipment, which they can never use and which probably doesn't even work. And that is how the money returns to America. And that is the engine of at least that gigantic segment of the world economy. It's oil goes out, dollars come in, dollars go back to America in exchange for the one industry that America has, which is weapons. And the fact that Trump just sold trillions of dollars of weapons to and whatever else to these Gulf countries is just that process. So it's not like this anything all that new and dramatic happened with
No,
these deals.
no, they sold out this Holocaust of our time for for nothing. They
Yeah.
they didn't yeah, it's just we they're very depressing
But yeah, like let's
states.
let's let's remember again who these people are, right? Like these are not like this whole thing of like this is another thing that I think we gotta get under control to our listeners. Like this, where are the Arab regimes? Why can't the Arab regimes do anything? Like these Arab monarchs were installed by the Americans. They are there to do, if you want to know what their job is to do exactly what they're doing right now. And so you can't like expect a change of heart. That's not how this works. They're not gonna have a change of heart. They're not gonna see something that that melts their hearts of stone and makes them realize that they should take the side of their Arab brothers any more than any Israeli has, defected to the Palestinian side. So it's just, you know, where are the Arabs? Like the Arab regimes are doing exactly what they were put in place to do.
Yeah, it was just the dog and pony show of it all. It
Mm.
just sort of pushed it over the edge, and
The women waving their hair
yeah, just the whole.
and then Jolani bringing the Syrian de facto president for a handshake. Attractive young man, young guy, tough past. Did you hear that little
Yeah, that's a good
description?
quote. Yeah,
Tough past,
he
attractive
he
guy,
called them all tall, dark, and handsome.
tall, dark, and handsome. I think Trump is unusually tall, right?
He is tall. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like 6'4". Um, so that's great. They lifted sanctions from Syria. I mean, Syria, I don't know how much of Syria is actually in Israeli hands right now. But again, he's doing exactly what he was put there to do as well. So there's no surprises coming from any of those directions.
No, and the Israelis still are continuing to bomb. It's not like they even got some kind of deal where the Israelis would withdraw or yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a dark moment in human history.
Yeah, it's a low point. It's a low point, maybe the low point. I don't know. I
Yeah.
wasn't here for, I mean, history being recorded history. There may have been things that happened before writing that were worse than this, but
But the Palestinian resistance doesn't rely on these countries.
hmm
It doesn't rely on, it predates these axes.
yeah,
Yeah, and its ability to defend itself
yeah,
is part of an indigenous project that they made insulated from these kind of from
yeah,
the flotsam and jetsam of international relations, and that's
yes,
um, a tribute to their resistance. And I think in the coming days, I mean, I think that the massacre of civilians, I think we've said this since the start of the war, but the massacre of civilians is, you know, it's because of the success of the resistance. What Israel's doing right now is not. I mean, they're still like I'm reading their field reports for today, and they're still saying they're not advancing, right? So they're still from their positions, are still in the buffer zones, and th're just shelling and bombing. Um, you
so
know,
this is their
yeah,
Gideon's
the
chariots.
I mean, they took credit today for 150 airstrikes. They haven't taken credit for 150 airstrikes in a day since December 2023. So they've turned it up to a level that goes back to the
Mhm.
beginning of the war. Um, and that's why we're seeing the devastating civilian casualties that I think are, you know, way undercounted.
Yeah,
Um,
there's no way.
for
This
each of
math
these
doesn't.
days. To say 100, I just think
Yeah,
they're significant undercounts. And one of the reasons why they're undercounts is because the hospitals have been destroyed. And I
yeah.
caught this on the Army radio feed that the Flotilla 13, which is Israel's like most advanced special forces, basically like their SEAL team, um, the Sheatet 13, they switched their commanders, change of commanders of Flotilla 13. Colonel R takes office, replacing Colonel A, who commanded the squadron throughout the war. First sentence about his accomplishments. During the fighting, the Sheatet 13, Flotilla 13, operated in 8 hospitals in Gaza, such as Shifa, Rantizi, Kamal Adwan, the Indonesian, Nasser, and Al Amal.
That's your resume.
That's what their
It's
that's
their resume.
of their most elite force in the most concentrated warfare in the history of their country. Um, it's the first sentence of his accomplishments is that they dismantled
And
8 hospitals.
are you saying the initials because they're not actually releasing the names of these commanders?
Yeah, they don't release their names. They're like
S-
secret units.
And the military pictures are of their photographs have their heads turned away from the camera?
Yeah. But that's the one. Remember when they took Shifa?
Yeah,
He was the guy. He stood in the doorway at Shifa, and they recorded the back of his head as he talked. Um, yeah, they're bragging about these operations that, um, yeah,
they
I mean,
behave like a criminal enterprise,
it's
which is an insult to criminal enterprises for the most
and,
part.
yeah, and then they say later on in his attributes, they say you were in places, or he's saying this to his troops, you were in places we never thought we would be. We carried out operations that will never be heard of. So
Hmm
so they feel like they can tell you about the dismantling of the hospital. In
So
their
the things they're,
society,
yeah.
that is the thing that they've taken the classified status off of and opened up the records to let you brag about sacking the hospitals. But there's other operations that you'll never hear of. I like,
Yeah, I mean, there was, I saw a news item going around Twitter today where someone said, like, there was some Israeli on a news show saying more or less proudly, like we're killing 100 a day and the world doesn't care, kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't think that the Israelis believed that they could do this. I think that
Yeah.
if they knew that there was no red lines,
Mm,
they would have handled a lot of things differently, from the war fighting, but even
mhm.
just the communication, the ways that they communicated their operations proved that they didn't. But the way they executed their operations definitely doesn't. This Gideon's chariot war plan is this, it's the war plan from the first day of the war.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like today they're massacring people in the Jabalia refugee camp. So they're getting ready to go into Jabalia for the fifth time. Jabalia camp for the fifth time.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything will be different. I mean, I think the starvation is definitely a significant factor, like a terrifying one.
Yeah.
That seems like the clock on that is, I think people have
Is
been
the clock.
saying
Yeah.
it because we can't believe that it's gone on this long. But I think we really are now at, so this is the beginning of day 78 of the closure of the border, like complete closure. That just means no medical supplies, no food, no tents, no, yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, again, Arab regimes, right? Like Egypt, this is not the deal that Israel and Egypt have, the Camp David deal of 1970, whatever.
no, no.
Israel's not supposed to be
No,
controlling
they used
Rafah.
to argue about whether they could expand the Philadelphia corridor by meters, and now the plan is that Rafah is just a parking lot.
Hmm.
It's completely destroyed, and that's the buffer zone now.
Yeah. And Egypt hasn't done anything.
No,
So like, you know, the Libya thing we should talk about. There's you were saying that in the American news they're actually talking logistics about how to get 1 million people. And it's interesting because they say 1 million, like there's
yeah.
supposed to be 2 million people.
Well,
Are
that's
they
what they say about the food too. The aid hubs, the four aid hubs, are each hub provides 300,000 meals
right?
for 300,000 people. So it's like, okay, well, that's
So
half of the
so they've
population.
accepted somehow that half is going to disappear. And no, again, student of history, no 1 million people has ever been evacuated by plane from anywhere to anywhere.
Well, that's
That's
what
never
this
happened before.
NBC story said, that they had apparently five sources in the Trump administration that are working on this, but they didn't tell them the logistics. So NBC was, in their infinite wisdom, was like, well, let's crunch the numbers.
Mm.
How many buses would it take? How many kilometers would we have to drive them? Um, yeah, it completely uh,
But
insane.
but like they wanted to deport the Jews. The Nazis wanted to deport the Jews to Madagascar, and then like the Holocaust was basically like on paper a plan to deport them, and they deported them, and then they exterminated them. And like this is not fooling anybody. There's no plan to take them to Libya. They're going for extermination here. They're not going for anything else. And again, like I don't think we should like follow the imaginary logistics of this ethnic cleansing. Like what they're doing and what they're trying to do is announced, it's re-announced, it's celebrated, it's photographed, it's videographed, it's
Yeah.
there's no the only people who are denying it are desperately trying to deny it.
Yeah.
So um there's a tweet I wanted to show you, and someone sent it to me, and it's from I think someone in Yemen, and it was originally in Arabic, but I guess he translated it himself or had someone translate it. So it's basically Muhammad al-Shami, Mama Shami too. And basically his narrative is that the enemy succeeded in, after the axis of resistance had a whole bunch of successes. The United States intervenes, militarily neutralizes Iraq, Lebanon, and Iran, succeeds in toppling and fragmenting Syria, um, but failed to deter the Mujahideen in Palestine and Yemen. So Yemen takes them by surprise, rising with greater strength. The US shifts its full force toward Yemen in a bid to complete what it believed was an imminent Israeli victory, but failed. And the Mujahideen in Gaza stood firm as well. Now they fear Hezbollah and Iran re-entering the front lines and are deeply concerned by Yemen's growing capabilities. Um, and then there's some other stuff that I don't know. You guys can read it yourself. But so the he's arguing the change in the US strategy is to try to exit with the greatest possible benefits, cement the occupation of Syria, try to get Takfiri groups to go against Yemen, which they've been cooking that for some time.
Yeah.
Um, Loot the Gulf countries, also cooking for a lot of time.
Well, they fought. They did it for 10 years. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then this one is interesting too. Buying time to study the sources of strength within the axis of resistance, especially Yemen and the Palestinian resistance, to craft future plans to dismantle them. I think those are all really good points. That is definitely how the Americans and Israelis think. Like any setback is temporary. I think that like we kept talking about before the Israelis attacked Lebanon in 2024. We were like, Hezbollah has lots of surprises for Israel, but it turned out Israel also had surprises for Hezbollah, right? Like the pager attack, and the surprises that Israel has are always like based on unbelievable breaches of ethical behavior or norms of behavior. But that is like that just keeps going. Like their
And
ability,
Hezbollah refused those,
yeah.
refused
Hezbollah
to do
refuses,
those.
Hamas refuses.
They refused to attack the civilians
Yeah.
in the same way. Yeah. I mean, I think neutralized in the sense, like it doesn't mean defeated so much as he means like taken off the battlefield,
Neutralized.
neutralized.
Neutralized means like, it doesn't, like in the movies, they're like, we neutralized him, meaning we killed him. But like neutralized technically means you take an enemy and you render them neutral, meaning they're no longer, an active combatant against you. And by
Against
that
your genocide.
definition, yeah,
Yeah.
by that definition, the only non-neutralized ally of the Palestinians is Yemen right now.
Yeah, and they launched another ballistic missile at Ben Gurion Airport today, and we saw they did it at night, so we actually could see the missile defense systems, and they looks like it's at least looks like a half a dozen
Hmm.
interceptors, which is interesting because that's kind of the one missing detail on like the Israelis say, a missile was launched and some time passes and they say it was intercepted, and then when they get through, sometimes you'll get a leak about how many interceptors it got
It
through,
passed
but
through.
the real number of how many of these multi-million-dollar air defense missiles are launched against the ballistic missiles is, I think, a missing piece. There's a lot of missing pieces, of course, because of the military censor that controls all the information coming out of Israel. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So,
the sustainability of if you're launching half a dozen at each one of these ballistic missiles, it
mhm.
it changes the calculus of what of the sustainability of the Israeli.
Yeah, especially since it really genuinely looks for now like the Americans have left the building.
Oh, they've definitely left. The
Yeah.
USS Truman Carrier Strike Group left through the Suez Canal yesterday. So they're in the Mediterranean. They're on their way home. They didn't sail back out the Red Sea. So no,
Hmm.
and then the other carrier that arrived later, the
Vincent.
Vincent, it never crossed the Bab el Mandeb into the Red Sea. It stayed out in the Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean.
That was
Um,
bold of them going in there.
and the B-2 bombers all left Diego Garcia,
Hmm.
which half of the US heavy bomber, stealth bomber fleet was there. Um, so they really did withdraw. They really did
Yeah.
withdraw.
And
They'll send
so
another carrier group. They'll send another carrier group, but they withdrew the fighting capacity. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like Trump got a briefing one morning. It was like the day they lost the second
close call, yeah.
Super Hornet into the lake, which was the third they've lost on that deployment. Um, and yeah, it sounds like he just
Didn't like what he
impulsively
heard.
said, "Yeah, let's stop this."
So, yeah, I mean,
Clear
the
victory for Yemen.
yeah, and Yemen is not, they didn't give
And then
anything.
the
They didn't give anything
Israelis
in return. Yeah.
yeah, the Israelis responded to the Americans leaving them by the Israelis bombing the Sana'a airport, the international airport in Yemen, and said that it would be out of service for, they said like half a year was their estimate,
It's back
and
in service.
it's back in service
The thing
10 days
about,
later.
yeah, and that bombing's fishy. I don't know that Israel can bomb Yemen without American help,
Yeah.
period. It
It's
doesn't,
it's a lot. It's a lot. It takes a lot. But they have American help because in the sense that they are flying over Saudi, they have all of
but are they aerially refueling?
yeah,
And
they can
and
do
the Israelis have that?
yeah, they can do that. For that distance, yeah. In protected because they're in protected airspace.
And
So
that's
that's
not an
different than
American.
Iran because they can't. In Iran, the issue is to hit the nuclear sites in Iran, they would have to carve a pathway into Iran. It's not just hitting the outer edges. So you're flying over, hostile enemy territory.
I mean, that's a whole other issue with Iran where it's like
So Israel
Iran
needs
and
the U.S. to attack Iran, but I don't. They don't need the U.S. to carry out these. Um,
they're very bad.
they're not they're not very potent strikes.
Right.
It's 15 jets carrying two bombs each and yeah, turning around. So they
I
don't have the
mean,
capacity to carry out a war in the way that the US was doing. So the Yemenis basically saved their people from being attacked by the Americans.
mhm.
American ships were not sailing through the Red Sea. They haven't since January
Yeah.
2024. So that whole like we won't target your ships and Trump being like they're not going to target our ships. Like your ship US ships weren't going through there and they aren't going to go through there now. It's not like there was
Mhm.
a blockade that opened and all of a sudden American ships are sailing through the Red Sea because the entire industry, shipping industry, adapted, right? And started sailing around. They raised the rates. They, did the logistics completely differently to be going into different ports. And the number one thing is the risk insurance. And the risk insurance doesn't change just because there's a verbal agreement between Trump and that's not enough to change the risk agreement. So basically, the Yemenis got the Americans to stop bombing them, allowing them a freer hand to focus on attacking Israel, which they never stopped doing, even when they were being attacked by the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the difference between all previous rounds of combat between the Palestinian resistance in Gaza and the Israelis, is that there's this extra ally that cannot be neutralized, and that is that is going to keep fighting until the siege is broken. They're very specific that they're
Yeah.
not going to stop until the siege is broken. It's not about the war being over, it's about the siege being over. And that is a huge leverage that Gaza has never had before. And I know that, like, there's a lot of things that are bad that are happening in Gaza that have never happened before, but this is one thing that they have that they've never had before on in their favor.
And the Yemenis fired missiles over Trump's head while he was in
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia. They fired three in 24 hours in the time that he was there. And the Israelis say that something like one third of the missiles are intercepted in Saudi or fall short in Saudi. So the Israelis were saying like, "Wow, that's a they're bold. You know, they're bold. They're whatever the opposite of surrendering is. You know, they're like,
Yeah, they don't care. But, like, this war, this genocide, this war of liberation, it is ultimately, like, it has fallen entirely on the Palestinians.
as it always was, I guess, right?
Yeah, and they always assumed as much. But as much as, like, the where are the Arabs and where's the world, like, the Arabs and the world are not. This is not. They're not. They're not there. They're not going to be there.
Yeah,
And like, so whatever happens in Gaza, and I don't, who knows? But, like, we can say a few things. If they mean to occupy Gaza militarily indefinitely, there's a certain density of soldiers required to do that.
that they don't. It doesn't seem right now like they have that,
It doesn't
and
seem like they have
that
that.
kind of occupation is where the resistance
Thrives.
that would they would yeah, in relative
So,
terms.
can they exterminate? Like, the question from 2023, can they do this through bombing and starvation? And it's still an open question. Maybe whatever they can do, they're not going to stop there, right? If they go to the West Bank and succeed, they'll go to Lebanon. If they go to Lebanon and succeed, they'll go to Syria. They're not going to stop. So, however this goes on, they've set a certain kind of goal for themselves that is they have this void in the center of their body politic and their psyches that can never be filled. And I don't know, I don't know where this world is going this week, more
Yeah,
than most weeks.
I mean, Israel's war goals from the beginning of the war were clear: to return the captives through violence, to destroy Qassam and the resistance, to destroy the government at
Mhm.
all levels, and that Gaza would no longer be a threat
Mhm.
to Israel. And none of those things have been achieved, which is why Israel has to keep extending this war.
Yeah. But those goals are impossible to translate into a set of actions that a military can take, especially their military with its fetishes for dressing up in dead women's clothing for a video and playing with children's toys. Like, it's
Yeah.
yeah, so as they turn to this kind of war of extermination, it just it's transforming the world for sure. It's transforming their society and all of our societies, but, like, I don't know. I don't see it just doesn't I don't see any, like, like, a negotiated end to this, and then what, they go back to normal and the mediators are all on completely corrupted now and suborned. And Hamas sent that message, right? Hamas said, like, unless the crossings are opened, future negotiations are going to be very complicated.
Yeah, they also said today, Hamas said today that we will not return to partial deals
Hmm.
because there was the talk about the Witkoff um,
Yeah.
outline,
Well,
which is like basically release half of the
yeah,
living
sure.
captives for not
A
an
day for a
exchange.
pause. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not even talking for exchange. And that's, I think, one of the things that about Witkoff was that Witkoff inherited an already established ceasefire agreement that was many pages long, that included hundreds, if not thousands of names debated back and forth. They don't have anything like that right now. And
Yeah.
because the destruction of that agreement, the ceasefire agreement,
Mhm.
has been Israel's main priority, they're not going back to phase two of the
Right.
negotiations. And
No.
so it requires, because there's like the whole thing about even Witkoff getting this soldier back. It was like he said that they had like something like 42 or 48 or 72 hours to agree to this thing. Like he wants to get all this stuff done in a couple of days
Hmm.
while he's in Qatar, and it just doesn't. These deals are super complicated about who's going to be released, which Palestinian prisoners are going to be released, and all the
And now,
time Israel's
yeah.
just adding more. And now
Yeah.
that they're back to these, attacking shelters, they're making more arrests. In the West Bank, there's been
Yeah.
17,000 arrests in the West Bank since October 2023.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't understand how, even if there's a ceasefire now, what is how what's gonna stop them from rearresting everybody and like they talk about international guarantees, but it's like the mediators that guarantee this. These countries, Egypt and Qatar and
Yeah.
America, all of which have not don't guarantee anything.
No.
So it just looks like very open-ended right now. And
Yeah. I mean, I think there's still big questions about the Israelis, about their troop numbers, about how many
mhm,
people reported, that I think, like how many reservists actually reported, how
yeah.
many soldiers they need to do the things that they're talking about doing.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. And
they're
how
attacking right now. They're attacking Khan Yunis, Dar al-Bala in the center. So in the south, they're attacking the center, and they're attacking the north. So if the idea is that there's going to be simultaneous, and there's three divisions that are like skeleton essentially, have been for the last 2 months, that they're going to infill. Like the 98th
mhm.
division is on its way back,
And the state
162nd.
and the state's gonna start arresting religious objectors, mass arrests of Orthodox religious objectors if they don't show up.
Yeah, I mean this
And
that's the debate because Netanyahu
yeah,
protects those
yeah.
for his coalition. So yeah, no end in sight, I would say right now.
So this week it'll be ground operations. You'll probably have lots of. I don't know if you'll have them by Thursday. You'll probably
Well, I
have
have
some.
I have a couple from they released that complex operation in Shujaiya. They released a video of it that happened in April, at the end of April, and I reported on that without video because it was so clear from the Israelis that they got hits. They got hit so hard that they talked about it. Um, and then that video came out from that. Shujai is interesting because I mean, one of the things about that video was that they clearly put like some production into it. That was the
Hmm.
first time they used like diagrams. But also Shujai is very their operational security is very tight. They're the battalion that um, kept all their videos during the last summer when there was the invasion, the re-invasion of Shujaiya for 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks. They kept all the videos until after the invasion, until after the Israelis left, and then they put them all out, which is just interesting compared to other battalions and how they operate. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that we're going to be seeing, if Israel's going to do what they say they're going to do, I think that we're going to see a lot of resistance operations. I think, that the resistance is not suicidal, and that's, I think, something we've been saying all along, because you know, at one point, Qassam's resistance was based on suicide bombings
Hmm.
and based
Hmm.
upon individual sacrifice. Um, and now they're not. They don't do that. We haven't seen any of those kind of like, Sun Tzu, no way out kind of fighting. They do have the ability to withdraw to areas to fight
Yeah.
another day, but
Yeah.
this is a ground war that's going to cost Israeli soldiers in order to kill children. And it's not going to get them any closer to. I mean, Hamas has already agreed to the Community Support Council,
Yeah.
which is basically the technocrats that would take over.
Yeah.
Qassam is never disarming.
The
If
only thing Hamas can't agree to is be exterminated and for everybody to die, which is what Israel wants.
Yeah,
But if Israel got that, they would just go on and continue somewhere else. So, yeah, we have to, yeah, I mean, the ground war will be, we'll be watching more videos, we'll be seeing more operations, reading more field reports, and then we'll see what the Israelis do then.
yeah.
What is
Sober
it that
analysis in dark moment.
what is it we tell people to do, John? Hang in there.
Hang in there.
Hang in there until Thursday and then the following Sunday. So Electronic Intifada live stream will be the next time you see John, you guys.
See you there. It's good to see you, Justin.
Get to see you twice in one day, actually.
Double day.